Welcome everyone. Imagine living in a grey world while pretending everything is colorful. This is the reality for those with high functioning depression, a condition where the brain masterfully hides emotional turbulence behind a mask of normalcy. So today we'll dive into the fascinating neuroscience behind this silent struggle and uncover how the same brain that allows someone to appear fine on the outside is simultaneously sabotaging their emotional well-being on the inside. The high functioning depression is something we don't talk about as much as we should, probably because it's so easy to miss. So the people dealing with it don't fit the typical image of someone who is struggling with the depression. You might think of someone who visibly sad, withdrawn, or having trouble with basic day-to-day activities. But with the high functioning depression, that's not what we see. On outside, everything can look fine. The person might be going to work, keeping up with the social commitment, even cracking jokes. But on the inside, it's a completely different story. So let's get into the brain role in high functioning depression. What makes it so tricky is that the same brain that is allowing person to function normally in society is also silently sabotaging their emotional well-being. In high functioning depression, there is disconnect between what the brain is pushing towards pushing outside to the world, and that is its feeling internally, and what it is feeling internally. The brain, through all this complexity, can hide this feeling so well that even close friends and family might not realizing what's going on. Imagine your brain as a complex orchestra. So first of all, let's start with the brain circuit involved. We know that the depression in general affect the brain reward system, especially the neurotransmitter like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These are chemical messengers that regulate mood, motivation, and feeling of pleasure. In someone with the depression, there is often a disruption in how these chemicals are produced, transmitted, or received. But in high functioning depression, this disruption may not be extreme as in major depression. That's why the person can still get out of the bed to go to work and engage with people. However, there is still enough of the misfire in these systems that they don't feel joy or satisfaction in what they are doing. One of the key brain area involved here is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision making, planning, and controlling emotions. In high functioning depression, the prefrontal cortex often stays active and relatively intact, which is why the person can still organize their life and appear put together. But deeper in the brain, in the limbic system, the part that deals with the emotion, mood regulation, and memory, these things are off balance. The amygdala, which processes the emotion, especially negative one like fear and sadness, can be overactive, making the person feel more overwhelmed, anxious, or hopeless than the let on. At the same time, the hippocampus, which is involved in forming new memories and is also sensitive to stress, may shrink or become less active over time in people with a chronic depression. That includes those with the high functioning form as well. This could explain why people with a high functioning depression might feel stuck in loop of negative thoughts or have difficulty recalling positive experience in their lives. It's possible to have an overactive amygdala, which is cause a lot of those negative emotions to bubble up, and somewhat functioning prefrontal cortex, which allows the person to keep living a seemingly normal life. The prefrontal cortex essentially steps in and says, I know you feel terrible, but we have responsibility, so let's keep going. Next, the brain default mode network, which is DMN. that also play a part in high functioning depression. The default mode network is active when we are at rest, like when we are daydreaming, thinking about the past or the future, or reflecting on ourselves. The people with the high functioning depression often get stuck in thoughts where their mind replay negative thoughts or scenario over and over. So because high functioning depression often coexists with a high level of responsibility, perfectionism, or even success, the person is typically under a lot of pressure. And this can trigger the brain's stress hormone system, especially hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is HPA axis. When you are constantly stressed, the HPA axis releases cortisol, the stress hormone. Over time, chronic exposure to cortisol can damage brain cells, particularly in the hippocampus, and contribute to feeling of exhaustion, make lack of interest, and detachment. Interestingly, because someone with a high functioning depression is usually very good at hiding their symptoms and maintaining appearances, the brain gets into the habit of masking the deeper emotion issues. In some cases, the brain execute function like the decision making and problem solving can almost overcompensate for the emotional imbalance. The person might become even more focused on tasks or projects as a way to distract themselves from what's going on inside. This can make high functioning depression even harder to detect because it often looks like someone who is just working hard or keeping busy, but inside it's a completely different experience, one marked by fatigue, detachment, and inability to feel true happiness. Another aspect that often goes unnoticed in high functioning depression is how it affects the person's self-perception. There is a lot of cognitive dissonance going on. The brain knows something is wrong emotionally, but because the person is still able to function, they might downplay their own suffering. This creates a disconnect between how they feel and what they believe they should feel. The brain can be really good at convincing something that it's not that bad or that they are just being overly sensitive. This is partly due to societal expectation and how we have conditioned to think about the mental health. The person might be weak for having these emotions, which only feed into the cycle of self-criticism and internalized negativity. The problem is that the constant push to maintain normalcy put additional strain on the brain, even though the person might not be experiencing full-blown episode of depression. Their brain is still dealing with chronic low-grade stress and emotional suppression. And over time, this can lead to burnout or more serious depressive episode because the brain simply can't sustain that level of overcompensation indefinitely. What is also interesting is that the many people with high functioning depressions are often high sympathetic and attuned to other people's emotions. Their mirror neuron system, which is responsible for understanding and sympathizing with others, might be highly developed. This can make them very good at the supporting others while neglecting their own emotional needs. The brain is essentially wired to help others first, which can leave them feeling emotionally drained and disconnected from themselves. So understanding the brain's role in high functioning depression is crucial because it helps us realize that it's not just a matter of being tough or pushing through. The brain is working overtime to balance emotional pain with the societal demand, and it is not sustainable in the long run. So treatment for the high functioning depression often involve cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT, which helps the person recognize and challenge negative thought patterns. The goal is to break the cycle of thought and self-criticism that the brain has fallen into. Another approach is mindfulness-based therapy, which targets the brain default mode network. By practicing mindfulness, the person can train their brain to stay more present rather than getting stuck in negative thought loops. This can help quit the overactive amygdala and reduce the brain stress response. Next beautiful thing is physical activity. So the physical activity is another powerful tool, particularly exercise, which increase the production of endorphin, dopamine and serotonin, which help improve mood and reduce feeling of anxiety and stress. In fact, a study shows that the regular exercise can increase the size of hippocampus, which might be particularly beneficial for people with high functioning depression, given that chronic stress can shrink this brain region. It is also important to recognize that the social support play a huge role in recovery. The brain thrives on connection, and while someone with a high functioning depression might feel the need to isolate, reaching out to friend, family or therapy can make world of difference. It's not easy because the brain might be telling them that no one will understand or that they don't want to burden anyone. But the breaking that cycle of isolation can help rewire the brain for connection and emotional resilience. So, if you or someone you know might be dealing with high functioning depression, remember that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It is a way of giving your brain the support it needs to heal and thrive. The brain is incredibly resilient organ, capable of remarkable change and growth. With the understanding, support and the right intervention, it's possible to overcome the challenges of high functioning depression and cultivate a healthier, more balanced brain. So thank you for the watching and see you in the next video.